So, we've heard from so many of you seeking ways to stay grounded and purposeful in these really uncertain times. And that's why we're really excited to announce Thomas Hübl's new 5-month live online intensive, The Path of the Courageous Soul. So, you can join Thomas for 10 live sessions exploring how to transform trauma into wisdom, how to strengthen your nervous system, and live in alignment with your deeper purpose. And you'll also get to hear from guest teachers Michael Mead, Angela Costa, Aya Afo, and Otto Scharmer on courage, leadership, and collective transformation. Enrollment is now open and the course begins November 16th. If you're ready to learn more, you can check your email for details or click the link on this page if you're watching the replay. We hope you'll join our global community committed to healing and transformation. And for those of you who are new to Thomas and his work, he is a renowned teacher and international facilitator who's been leading large-scale events and courses for over 20 years on the healing of collective trauma. Thomas works within the complexity of systems and cultural change, integrating the core insights of the great wisdom traditions and mysticism with the discoveries of science. He is the author of 2 books, Attuned, Practicing Interdependence to Heal Our Trauma and Our World, and Healing Collective Trauma. He also has a forthcoming book co-authored with Dr. Richard Schwartz called Releasing Our Burdens. So welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Anna.
Great to be with you here. Yeah.
And you.
Yeah, and since we've announced this event, we've received a lot of questions, so it's clearly a pretty timely event, and I'm really excited to dig into this with you. And for those of you watching, we're going to get to some of your questions as well a bit later. And first, I'd love to start by asking you, Thomas, just to share more about the idea of thresholds of transformation, evolution, and revelation, and this the path of the courageous soul. Like, what are these thresholds and how can we navigate them?
Mm. Yeah, thank you, Anna. And hello, warm welcome to everybody who's listening. Yes, so I think we all agree, or many of us agree, that these are times that are challenging, disruptive, structures are falling apart. We are faced with and forced to change, to reorganize, and to allow change to happen at an unprecedented speed. I think for all of us, not only is data increasing every second that we are here, the world's becoming faster, hence it's becoming smaller. And the world that was some decades ago still like big and far apart has become a global village. And I think we are seeing the collapse of identity structures, evolutionary structures that made a lot of sense until recently, but they don't make sense anymore. And I think evolution is the power that is equal to life as a movement. And all the wisdom traditions speak about the impermanence. Everything's moving, everything's changing all the time. And of course, we create structures, we create forms that are coherent for some time, but at a certain time, life asks us to change those structures into something new. And so why are we talking about it? The question is, why are we talking about change, and why are we not just changing? It's easy. If the nature of life is movement, and if we're all changeable, so why don't we change according to the needs of the world? And I think one reason is that the parts of us that create habits and forms, they can change with enough activation energy. But the parts of us that are hurt, they don't want to change. Trauma doesn't want to change. Trauma is frozen past. Trauma is locked information. Trauma is also locked data, like locked learning. And so when we talk about restorative processes, when we talk about healing, when we talk about integration or transformation, what does transformation mean? Taking one state of information and transforming it into another state of information. And that is a beautiful process, and a lot of therapy or healing methodologies and a lot of wisdom traditions talk about this change of energy from one state to another, like so that we can move into new forms of reality. But as we can see now, that change brings up a lot of pain. It brings up a lot of fear. It brings up a lot of grief, a lot of anger, and even hatred. And it brings up a lot of division, polarization, fragmentation, stress, uncertainty brings up a lot of stress in us. We don't know really how to make sense sometimes of this moment. And and I believe that this is a moment that really needs us. And not us just as individuals, it needs us as individuals, but it also needs us as collectives. That's why we speak, I and we in our organizations, we speak a lot about like how collectives come together to heal. How can individuals do their individual work, develop individual skills like regulation skills, getting to know deeper our bodies. Our bodies are nature. We are not lost in life because we are nature. And the more we become embodied, the more we become regulated, the more we become rooted in our bodies, in the wisdom of our ancestors, in the wisdom of our cultures, where we come from. We we have we can't be lost because we have a direction. But if we feel disconnected partly from ourselves, from our agency, when we feel disconnected from our roots, then it feels like the change is really, really scary. Or when the change brings up a lot of unprocessed fear. So change ability, the ability to change is actually, I think this time asks us to develop certain competencies or capacities. And those capacities help us to navigate at least better in these times that are often very fragmented, often confusing, disorienting, and really and bring up a lot of stuff. And if I don't have the right tools to work that stuff that comes up, all kinds of content that might come up in us, and I don't have a supportive environment because I feel too isolated, then I stay with the pressure cooker of evolution inside of myself. And that either leads to depression and demotivation and helplessness, or it leads to a lot of agitation. But if I know how to transform that energy, then that energy is not blocking my way, it is my way. And I think that's when the courage comes to say, yes, I'm committed to life. I'm committed to life. And even if some of these moments are not comfortable, I'll find a way to go through it. And that's why we call the course also the path of the courageous soul, because it needs courage to meet our pain. And that doesn't mean that we need to overwhelm ourselves constantly. Sometimes we read the news or we hear things that are simply too much for us, and that's okay. And to find ways how to find the appropriate digestion to digest the information that we are consuming is an important skill too. Information regulation is a very important skill, because if I just get bombarded, then I even numb out more or I get more agitated. So that's not really helpful. But what's helpful is that as an individual, I become a hub of transformation, and that transformation leads to my own development. But it's not just about me personally, it's about that every one of us that transforms certain parts of ourselves into an update, into something new, becomes ecosystemically impactful. So my change becomes a quality in the ecosystem that I create with other people. And everybody's change. So like everybody's change is not, and that's the misunderstanding of modernity, that individuals are separate particles. We are not separate. We are always interdependent. We might feel very separate because we might feel isolated. We might feel kind of disconnected. Because trauma hurts, the modulation capacity of our brain and our nervous system to modulate what we experience, how we experience our environment, and how we experience our interior world. When in an integrated nervous system or in integrated parts of myself, I can fluidly modulate inside and outside. Sometimes I listen more to my inside. Sometimes I listen more to, I'm more in my environment, but I'm not losing one or the other. But in my hurt and my pain, there is a separation. And that broken bridge between inside and outside perception is one of the key elements of so much pain that we see. Because I deeply believe where we are really related, things cannot fall apart. There's nothing to fall apart. Relation is streaming. Relating is streaming. Nothing can fall apart in the places where we are related, where we are present. Nothing. This is data flow. What can fall apart is all the structures and identity structures that are iced over, that are hurt, massive wounds around the world where there's a lot of trauma, and that hurt becomes brittle. That hurt becomes even old. That's where we become old. And I think that's where also structures in our world became old. And so when evolution pushes us into new updates and technology pushes us into a higher speed, and our nervous systems can channel it, then it creates a lot of overheating inside of us. And that has severe side effects. So that's why I believe we are at the threshold of transformation. We are at the threshold to be reborn into a new world, into a world that already knocks on our doors and is already here, but parts of us are still in a world, in a conditioning or an identification with the world that we know. And that can change. And that's also why we call this call thresholds of transformation. It's the art to transform something. It's an ancient art. All the wisdom traditions talk about transformation and the beauty of transforming, the beauty of evolution, movement, and the beauty of revelation. But revelation is a term that has a lot of kind of past weight or associations. But from a spiritual standpoint, revelation, I believe, is not something that comes in the future. Revelation is a way to live my life. If I live my life in a way that allows me to be more present, more emergent, more connected, more relational, more intimate with life, life reveals itself to me anyway. So revelation is not something to come. It's not a promise of the future. We made it a promise of the future. And I think that's also a big trauma symptom, that it's gonna happen, or hope is in the future. In trauma, hope needs to be in the future because this moment is so painful that we almost cannot be here. So it's intelligent. It gives us an anchor in the future. But if we want to be impactful in the world, hope needs to come back into our agency. If we want to change aspects of our life, transform together, we bring the pearl of hope back from the next moment into the present moment. And that feels truly empowering. And empowerment doesn't mean that one person will change everything. No, that's actually also a symptom. And it shows that I don't feel regulated in that I am part of an orchestra. And what we really need to do is to find our tribe, people we resonate with, to find our to find the communities and networks where we can be impactful together. And that those networks or collectives, building collectives, being part of a collective that has a collective dimension of intelligence, and it has an individual dimension of skill building and intelligence. And I and C, I and C are interdependent, which also means that it's upon us to create the world around us that we want to be living in. And there will be elements that tell us, oh, it needs to be later. It can't be now. But if we can bring that closer and closer into this moment, then our life becomes revelatory. And revelatory means that more and more the coherence in myself, the flow in my own nervous system helps me to reveal information. We call this inner guidance. We call it groundedness and orientation in life. We call it high levels of relational skill sets that help us to have to begin to create a social environment from inside out that is the world that we want to live in. Not we are waiting that somebody does it. We create it around us. It's an ecosystem. And that also the connection to the future, that the future is not a later point in time. And that's why I also invited Otto to join us, Otto Schama, because I love his take on emergence. That's very similar to the spiritual, or very resonant with the spiritual practice, that the future is a capacity. It's not a next moment in time. To be connected inside to our own potential and be able to update our lives whenever that's needed, that's a skill. And so I think many of these skills that we can practice to meet this moment, and to also be there for people in our life, our family members, our clients, or people at work, in our society as citizens. And on a bigger level, I think it's also the fact that we can have this moment together. And our communities are global communities from all continents. This technology enables us to come together and have an intimate moment together, have a shared space together, do very deep work together, very deep transformational work together. But it also is, it plugs us in to, and maybe for the first time in history, it plugs us into real life data pretty much close to when it happens. So we have been initiated into global citizenship, but I don't think we have the collective regulation function to really make use of that global intimacy that our technology gives us, so that our inner world, what we feel deeply inside, and what happens in the world are congruent, and therefore we create tremendous collective impact. And also everything that happens in the world that is deeply painful is deeply impactful. And I think we're still at the beginning to learn how to create a regulated global environment that we are all part of. It's a huge data network, and how to move in it in a way that is skillful and that initiates us into a new level of global awakening. But this is the time. I deeply believe this is the time, and the technology that is so quickly advancing and changing with all its shadows and all its benefits, blessings, is a part of it. And the energy that is flowing, the consciousness expansion that so many people feel, something is awakening in us. We feel drawn to a practice, we feel drawn to heal, we feel drawn to connect, to be in community together and do this work together all over the world. We see those collectives. This is the time. And that's why this is just an introduction, of course, into revelation, because the intimacy with life and the what kind of practices help me to live a revelatory life, like a life that reveals itself and that feels deeply connected and intimate. That's a very powerful question, I believe. And so that's why we are doing the work that we are doing. And maybe Anna, you want to come back in, and I know there are so many hundreds of questions that came in, and so maybe we can have a little bit more of an exchange now, and it's not too
Yeah,
long.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And I was just also sitting with how you said if we want to be impactful in our life, hope needs to come back into our agency. We bring that pearl of hope back from the future into now. And I think many of us have like questions like, how do we do that? Um, and I wanted to start here with bringing in a couple of questions that are similar. Michelle asks, how can I stabilize myself in times where the old path doesn't exist anymore, external and inner world, and the new is not showing up yet, externally
Mhm.
and inner realignment? So you spoke a little bit to it, but, and
Mhm.
also Ryan says, how do I stay present and regulated when there's so much fear of what might come our way? And I
Mhm.
wanted to add to that that I've really heard you speak to the way that, often we stabilize in structure and it can be even ways that we've learned to stabilize in a tension, actually, trauma patterns and tension, and what happens when we learn to stabilize more in the fluidity of life, which has something to do with that courageous soul as well, like the
Mhm.
movement of life. And I think I notice many of us in that question, like I'm used to stabilizing in a certain way, but everything is moving now and changing, and it's painful a lot of the time too. So could you
Mhm.
speak just to those
Mhm.
questions for us and really own in a concrete way, like what does it mean to also bring that hope back into our agency in relation to this?
Yeah, first of all, I want again to honor our shared humanity. We can see, and we see this in our groups all the time. There are hundreds of people, or even more, and somebody shares something, and when I ask, okay, who knows that too? And then hundreds of hands go up. And so, first of all, that it's really great to be in this kind of communities to see, wow, there are shared patterns. My fear is not only my fear. My fear, of course, happens in me, and I need to find a way to work it, integrate it, learn from it, like what we call the innovation from the past. Every integration of trauma or different layers of our development are innovative because they release learning that we've never had. So there's an innovation stream from the future, but there's an innovation stream from the past, and both are important. One restores the body of Mother Earth, it restores the body of our world, the body of the mother, and one brings in the future potential. And and so when we when we look at our shared humanity, once we are part of a community of communities where we see, wow, actually, what I deal with is not only my personal problem. We are, and that's why I spoke a lot in the recent years about collective trauma, because they're collective. There's my individual life history that might have been very painful. There's there's my ancestral life history that is partly very blessed, maybe, and partly very painful. And then there is my collective life history, and those collective patterns are shared by millions or billions of people. So, what comes up in us in these different layers is not a problem on the way that blocks my way, it is our way, which means what comes up in us in relationship to change is what life asks us to digest and integrate, to develop vertical maturity, maturity as an individual and maturity as a society, to be able to be more responsive or response-able, able to respond to the needs and the necessities of our lives. And that starts with our children and with our families, and that goes into our communities and workplaces, and that goes into the society, how we show up in society. The responsiveness is part of maturity, the capacity to hold complexity, the capacity to hold contradictions, the capacity to show up and express our agency and see, wow, I cannot just wait until somebody fixes the world. I'm part of the change of the world. I need to contribute something. And if we all contribute something, we will all grow. And not everybody has to contribute in the same way, or like I do it, or I need to do it like others do it. I need to find where is my place in this composition. But you ask about the fears, and so the ways how to integrate that fear starts with that fear is not a mistake. That fear is a residue of some of our past. And that fear is an invitation to love deeper. That fear is a way to embrace my past, my ancestors' past in a different way, so that the fear actually can get digested into a new level of freedom, a new level of choice. And that when we digest and liberate our past, we also allow the world to become bigger. We allow the world that we pass on to our children to become bigger. There's more potentiality possible. And I think that's really great. And the kind of the modern version of purpose has become career in many ways. Like, what's my purpose? What can I do in the world? And that's true. Purpose is contribution, but purpose is that we have been born, we incarnated into this life because life has a question through us. The composition of our family, our DNA, our social society, circles around us, all of that is part of our purpose. That's why in the mystical traditions we call saints the ones that leave without a trace. What does that mean? It means we all come with a baggage of trauma, more or less. We all come with skills to integrate that trauma and energy and resources to integrate it. And as we walk the path of our life and as we walk our life's questions, we actually transform or integrate that weight of our past. Past has a weight. If we integrate it, it becomes presence. So the footprint, our footprint becomes lighter and lighter. And that allows us to serve more, to be more available for the world, for this moment. And another, I think, deep mystical principle is that throughout history, there was suffering and tremendous suffering in certain places, certain phases of human history. But the mystical traditions say that the few generations that are living right now carry the potential to resolve the current challenges. Always the generations that are alive at a certain time, human history or history of the planet, are the generations that potentially carry their answer. The answer to those challenges, whatever those challenges were throughout the development of life. And I think living a lifestyle to tap into our individual and collective becoming an answer to the current situation is what is the beauty and the challenge of this time. And so I think when we learn deeper practices that our body, for many of us, it's also to really deeply practice and embody and root in ourselves a new level of regulation, which is always a mix of training, practice, and integration work. We need both. We need integration work, but we also need training. And often, when the training doesn't show immediate fast results, we drop it. When in fact, if we stick with it and we stay with it long enough, we have a powerful tool to change our interior experience. We have done studies, MRI studies. Many people have done MRI studies that can show the transformation of our inner worlds possible. Our brain's changing, our nervous system is changing, different parts of our bodies are changing, regulation is changing. And what does regulation mean? I am more regulated, but when people around me are scared or afraid or angry or whatever they are, it doesn't throw me off immediately. It helps me to actually bring that regulation in, be able to relate when moments become more tense, when moments are very polarized. And that has an impact. So internal regulation becomes ecosystemic regulation, regulation of the ecosystem around us. Individual honesty becomes part of ecosystemic honesty, and so on. So I think there this is a great moment to practice, but sometimes I believe we do need the support of communities and collectives to strengthen the part of us that practices, and also to have ways to correct our practices when we do them in a way that is not helpful. Like, for example, stress regulation really needs to go through the body. And for many people, when we are stressed, we are too much in the mind, and then we try to calm ourselves down and we say, yeah, but we are practicing. Yeah, but we are practicing without being deeply anchored in the physical body. And stress regulation is a physical body issue, it's not a mental issue. And that's why sometimes just changing a little bit the way we practice and getting some feedback and having a community of feedback, peer feedback, is very important to really develop skills. And so, yeah, so maybe that's enough for now. I know there are many more questions, Anna.
No, and I love what you're saying about, and when you also said that like fear, or maybe there was another question about anger as well, that it's an invitation to love deeper. And what you're just saying right now, I think we see, I notice a lot, like we can get that idea, okay, love deeper, but what it really means to be with each other and with ourselves in learning, what does that mean when I love deeper, when I love my own past and my ancestors' past that lives in me as fear or as anger, as protest of some kind about the situation, and that there's some, I also see so often that there's many people in this community that support other people, but like in the moment of crisis, sometimes it's hard to turn that part of us that's so resourced towards our own fear, like to really know what is it like to love this inside when I'm activated. And I
Mm,
think that's part of our practice space, like you say, is we get to reflect to each other the ways that we actually have a lot of resource. Like I would know how to show up for you if you were activated, right? But like, can I bring all that resource to myself? Can I really learn what it means to love deeper when it touches something in my own core or in my ancestry?
mm,
And knowing how to reach to each other also when we need that, but really building that, like you said, just that moment to moment capacity to have a more love and sturdiness in, okay, I'm practicing, so I know I'm going to turn towards myself. I'm going to see where I have some agency here to ground something. So it's beautiful that you're speaking to that, and it connects with some other questions that came in about how do we do this when we're pushed past our usual limits and it's kind of relentless.
right. And adding to what you just said before we go to the next question is also that a strong time of change, most probably for many of us, at times will come with discomfort. And can I be, because before there was also the question of uncertainty, and uncertainty like once I know, oh, there are energy arcs in our development. And for some people, their arc is throughout their whole life. And for some people, their arc stops at a certain time. And before the new information takes us onto a new creative journey, there is a gap. If I know that that gap is natural, that's built in, that's also in a society that is not good at digesting life. We are not good at it. Maybe some indigenous wisdom traditions still hold the pearls of digesting, but the Western society or the mainstream society does not deal with digesting information, crisis, hardship well. We see this. How much did we digest COVID, for example? How much are we digesting wars and all the things that led up to where we are now? All over the world, we try to move on. We try to progress, but we need another quality that is undervalued, that doesn't have the same value system attached to it, that making space. Our soul's need is space. Soul needs space. And if I don't have enough space in my life, a certain inspiration and a certain alignment with my essence cannot happen. I need some space. And what is trauma integration? Trauma integration is digesting our past in an appropriate way so that integration leads to post-traumatic learning. But since many of us carry some trauma in ourselves, the progress and the trauma stress is faster than slowing down sometimes and making space. And many of our groups are also spaces. Even now, we all take this moment and we make space. And making space is like jam text. Text, if you read a book and you push all the letters together in the middle of the page, you can't read. And when you can't read, then you cannot make sense of that page. Sometimes in life, we cannot make sense of what's happening in life because all the letters are squeezed in the middle of the page. And what that needs is not to speed up more and try to read the next pages so that we maybe can make sense of the page that we don't understand, but to say, oh, like what helps us to decompress the text, to make space in between the letters, in between the words, so that the paper and the information, space and information, come into a different correlation or relationship. And that's true for our lives too. It doesn't matter. Somebody can work 16 or 18 hours a day and have space. Other people can work 16 hours a day and have no space. It's not a matter of how engaged I am and how many projects I'm running. It's a matter of the cultivation of space in our life. And I think we see collectively also that yes, we value progress so much, we pour trillions of dollars into progress, but we don't pour a fraction of that money into digestion. So extraction and extractive economy, same as trauma is extractive economy in my body, in our bodies, we reproduce that. And I think that's very important too, that in the moment when the energy is changing, and it seems like there's a phase where, I don't know, and many people many people that listen might be in a phase where we say, oh, like something is changing in my life, in our life. We need to be in it. We need to learn to be in the uncertainty, but uncertainty brings up fear. But that fear has nothing to do with the uncertainty. That fear is undigested past. So if we learn how to digest it and how to integrate it, we actually mature into seeing the next level of development. And maybe the last thing, I think it's very important that also, I think that like freedom of attention, that that I see how often our attention is bound by our past, so that part of my attention cannot go wherever it can go. It's pre-directed by undigested past. So part of my attention is locked, and then it will go habitually to what scares me, or where I am afraid that I will feel ashamed, or where I like all kinds of content of the past will attract my attention. And that's limiting my movement, or that's limiting our movement also as groups and cultures, communities, societies. And paying attention, and I think that's also part of our practice, is how do I liberate my attention, that I have more attention free and open for what's really happening. Because if part of my attention is bound in the past, that part of my attention is part of the repetition compulsion of old patterns. And if we can liberate it, I have it available to listen to you. I have it available to pay attention to what's happening, and things make more sense. Why? Because my perception is much wider of what's happening right now. So these are, I think, all important aspects in strong change moments, practices and skills that we can develop.
Yeah, that's great. And as you were speaking, I saw a couple of questions come in, like how do we make space and will we be learning how to digest the past in this? And just wanted like to highlight what you were saying about that. And that also when we first begin to make space, it may not feel like space at first because everything that we haven't slowed down for shows up. And then exactly that in this course, in many of your teachings, and we have practice spaces also to be in the digestion, to really
Mm.
slow the teachings down to this like basic unit of how we practice so that we actually feel what digestion means in the body and in the emotions. And so that's part of the course that we do have spaces and practices for that.
Exactly, very much. Many things that I shared now, also things that we're gonna do in the course, of course. That's why I'm mentioning that also, and also that we strengthen our capacity to digest the past, and we will do live process work that we can see also how that looks like when it's happening, and then we can learn directly from the practical application, like nervous system to nervous system, and we get the transmission of change, we get the transmission of integration, and I think these are all great learning tools. So we're not just learning theoretically, we're learning a lot through practices and through also collective practices as a group.
Yeah. And we can come back and speak a little bit more to that. But maybe could you say something about like where does courage come from? When we speak about a courageous soul, where do you feel what is that
I
principle?
think I think it's a mix. I mean, first of all, the fact that all of us are here in the room, everybody who's listening, every one of us feels called. And if we go inside and say, what's calling me? I'm sure here are many people in the room that are engaged in their own healing work, that are maybe even professionally working with other people, clients, patients, that feel a call to do, like to have some kind of spiritual practice, regulation practice, meditation, contemplation practice, yoga, like what Tai Chi, whatever we practice. And or mindfulness at work or whatever it is, but there is something that calls us. And I think that which calls us needs to be examined, because in the place where we feel calling, when we tune in, when we make space to connect to that part, we will see that there is a place that knows something without concretely knowing where we are going. And in that place of calling, the fact that we are on a journey, And in so many different ways we can be, there are so many modalities and ways and practices. But the fact that I feel called to, I often say that calling is the echo of your arrival. It's like the echo of, and it at first doesn't make sense because it's paradox. How can I hear the echo of my arrival? But I think that's like a koan to feel, wow, there is an intelligence in the calling, and that calling allows us to make steps where we don't know what's the real outcome, because where are we going? I mean, of course, some people say, oh, I want to be healed, I want to be enlightened, I want to get to know the divine, I want to whatever we want to. But at first, all these ideas are concepts. Without any reference, this a reference experience, these are concepts. But we are still going. And I think that's very powerful. So courage is connected to a part of us that knows something deeper, even if that knowing is not a conscious, rational knowing. But it's something we can trust. And it guides us to different places. It guides us here and there, and then we read books and we listen to podcasts. We go to workshops. Whatever we do, we practice. We get up and practice when other people go to sleep or do something else. And it's a strength. And courage comes from that resource. Plus, courage also, of course, comes from the resource that, and eventually they are anyway one, from the resource that is coming from our ancestors, the integrated parts of us that really, in a way, motivate us, or the agency we feel that motivates us to go deeper in life and to ask deeper and deeper questions, explore our wounds, learn to heal our wounds, and turn our wounds into more resources and into more courage. And so as we are on that path, our life becomes like a positive upward spiral, because everything we integrate adds more energy to our life. And that energy, when we use it wisely, takes us upwards on the spiral. So our life starts to expand continuously. Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, just excited that you have a lot more space to look at these kinds of questions and to answer the different ways that people are bringing aspects of this in. I see the excitement in the questions of like the specifics of how to do all that. And yeah, and so we started to speak a little bit about the course. We also had some questions come in. So this course is open, of course, to anybody, not just therapists or people who work with people and trauma and all that. And we did have a few questions coming in from therapists and caseworkers, um, kind of put them together. So yeah, Kathy, Anna, Catherine, and there's some other questions we brought together. So I'm thinking of participating in the Courageous Soul program. I would do so as a trauma therapist and wanted to ask about psychotherapists, trauma therapists who already work quite a bit with the nervous system. What input will we take away to further integrate into our practice? And how will this work help us better support our clients? What tools and practices will be presented? If you happen to be somebody who does work with clients, and you're invited
Mm.
anyway if you're not working with clients.
Mm. Yeah, I think there are many. Like one is like an expansion of the map of healing from individual trauma work to ancestral trauma work to collective aspects. I think that's really interesting and can be an additional expansion. Also, also being able to discern when our clients go through individual fears, but what happens when we are detoxing more collective layers that might trigger us individually, but that that actually there is a bigger detox process going on. And how do we orient our clients within this interdependence of individual and collective symptoms that show up, or individual, ancestral, and collective symptoms? So I think the expansion of the healing map, and also what that means in times of great changes, because we are being confronted at the moment, of course, with individual healing work, but that is boosted in a way or accelerated by a tremendous collective change process that we see right now, and that shows up as a lot of fragmentation, polarization. So I think we need to become literate or skillful on all these different levels. And another part, of course, that I think we put a lot of emphasis on is what are different forms of spiritual resources. So what can different spiritual practices give us access to, and how can we make use of that wisdom, and also learn some of the energetic principles, some principles of like a deeper spiritual practice, deeper flows of energy through us, and also what it means to, and that's what I believe it means to be on a path. To be on a path is not just that I'm on the path because I go 3 times in the week to yoga and I meditate every day 3 hours. That's great. I mean, that's fantastic. But to be on a path means to have some state practice, like how we attain certain states, and at the same time to have a practice how we live our life. And that alignment, that actually our life, more aligned with the movement of life, creates more flourishing, creates more well being, creates more flow, creates also more success, or creates more intimacy. And when we are not aligned with those streams of life, like some principles of nature or principles of the universe, then this creates symptoms all the time. And of course, the reason for this is because we feel dissociated from those streams because of our wounds and our past. But we can do both. Integration brings us closer to intimacy and agency and alignment, and practice brings us closer. And so if I have both streams, that is very, very powerful. And the last part is also community, to be embedded in a community, 1,000 nervous systems connecting and being together in a space and tuning in with something, practicing, even if we are not in the same room, and the diversity of a global nervous system, I think is a huge unseen impact that that this kind of spaces offer.
Yeah, I can really confirm what you're saying also, Thomas. I think within this community, there's such a beautiful resource of this, exactly this axis also of the vertical, like the spiritual practice and alignment with the soul, with the horizontal practice of yeah, whether you're a therapist or you're a human in community, that capacity to be nourished in the soul alignment and to show up here relationally and keep practicing and in digesting what shows up for us
Mm.
relationally as well is such a huge resource. And especially when I hear people saying, oh, I get overwhelmed and there's so much, and I'm hearing about a lot of pain, and being able to really feel the deep download of my own soul and that connection and spiritual practice is such an incredible resource and aliveness that can carry us through a lot of intensity and difficulty. Is there something else you
That's
want to
yeah.
say?
That to exactly underline what you just said. You like that often when we are in a place of supporting many people, it's really important also to have spaces where we feel supported, where and where we might, these collective topics might be also topics that affect us. So to have spaces where we can transform these collective topics for us so that we can pass those on to our clients, that's really, really helpful, because at the end of the day, we can only pass on what we work through ourselves. And so I want to underline what you just said. I think this kind of supportive community of many people with so many intelligences that are joining these spaces is really, really powerful.
And I think this is so important, whether you're a therapist or a human, just in your community, in your family. These times aren't times when that work is just for specialists, right? We're having these courses because
Yeah.
that is for all of us. And yeah, and I just think it's an amazing opportunity to be really studying and finding out together what it means to be courageous souls in this time, or even if you don't work with people, but you live in community and with people. And so there's always this opportunity in any moment to be that person who is has said yes to the soul journey, like to the journey of walking our questions, both our individual questions and our cultural questions, and now our global questions. We get to learn, like, what is my resource to say yes? And like you mentioned, older cultures, more indigenous cultures, our ancient ancestry, maybe we really knew how to go through dark times together, and maybe we had those wisdom traditions. And I think this is one of the spaces here in this community, especially in our more Western world, where we're remembering, where we're finding those practices again that connect us to the deep wisdom we need
Mm.
and to go through these times, the deep wisdom of the spiritual practice and also the relational practice. And I think there's just such a unique opportunity here to be doing this and
Mm.
practicing together. So thank you so much, Thomas, for how you continue to inspire and offer these opportunities.
Mm. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and so we're coming to the end of our call, and I just want to transition here. Thank you all so much for listening and participating with your presence. I saw a lot of questions coming, and it's beautiful. Your questions really nourish and open up more discovery. So it's beautiful to feel that, and we really invite you. We'd love to have you join us for the upcoming course to bring more of that inspiration and your questions and the learning that we're going to have together in the Path of the Courageous Soul that begins on November 15th. And to learn more, you can visit the website, pathofthecourageoussoul.com. So the course is going to include 10 sessions of live online interactive teaching and Q&A with Thomas, as well as 4 guest speaker sessions with Michael Mead, Angela Costa, Iafo, and Otto Scharmer, and 8 live integration sessions with breakout groups for community connection and practice are also included. You'll have full access to all course materials, including video, audio, transcripts, and graphic recordings from every session. There are several special bonuses, including Illuminating Your Soul's Path, a 10-part video series on mystical principles, Nourishing Your Nervous System, a guided 7-day reset, and the Best of Summit collection, which is 12 full-length talks from the Collective Trauma Summit. Altogether, the course offers over 50 hours of live sessions and teachings designed to be deeply rich and transformative experience. And if that resonates with you, we warmly invite you to join us for the Path of the Courageous Soul, which again is beginning on November 16th. And to learn more, you can visit the website pathofthecourageoussoul.com. And we'll post the link in the chat now as well, so you can see that. And you can check your inbox for an email from us with your link to learn more about the course. So, yeah, we'll have a lot more time to explore all of these questions together if you do decide to join us. And we're grateful that you were here with us today and bringing all of your life force and your curiosities and your walking questions to this space that we've had together today. We look forward to being with those of you who are able to join us for this course to deepen all of this process of what it means to be a courageous soul and to become more and more that in our walking question of our life today in these times. And so thank you so much. Thank you for attending. We look forward to being with you in the future. Bye for now.